Monument and memorial are generally synonymous, denoting objects that try to speak of the past, whether in a heroic or mournful register. In this sense, they're a matter of memory. This concept is not new. It has been known for quite some time that ideology does not rest in documents. It is in what that ideology has proven itself to value. It is in what that ideology has physically built. Da Vinci, one of the greatest minds of his time, once said that beauty perishes in life, but is immortal in art. That statement is the basis for discussing the architecture of the Soviet Union. The remnants of what once was the Soviet Union will remain in the stone bricks of the last century and will remain there until an ideology comes to existence which would rather forget why those bricks were laid. It is by no means a mistake, then, that the Soviet Union and their ideological buffet would build structures with such a clear style, and that they would spend the better part of a century guaranteeing that their ideology would be infused into every nail, board, and grain of sand used to construct their cities. In a time when communism had little faith in its ability to sway its own people, and no case for how it was better than the West, what did they build? The answer? Stalinism. Stalinism is an architectural style that is unique to the Soviet Union, and known for the liberal inspiration it takes from the Art Deco style. But that isn't quite accurate. There's more to the story. Stalinism came from a time in the Soviet Union when the demand for housing was at an all-time high, and when the Communist Party was still attempting to lay its foundations. What came from this were small apartments, no more than 6 stories tall, as more would require elevators, and those weren't in the budget. The Stalinist style is defined by the cost of construction, and by the inequality of construction for those that were important to the Communist Party and those who were simple workers. By no means were the apartments terrible, though. They were small and often ill-suited to face their surrounding environments. The oversight of exterior temperature was not something easily repaired, though, as it would require fundamentally changing how the party approached construction. Up until this point, the party designed as few apartment units as possible, as a variety of form did not outweigh the cost of such spending. This, however, did not stop the party from constructing luxury flats for the communist elites, outfitted with the height of luxury. A common phrase at this time was that we are not against comfort, just comfort in excess. The demand for housing never fell, though. Not only did it continue to grow, but the demand for better, more comfortable housing with better amenities increased. They wanted what the West had. They wanted brutalism.
Giddy with delight, seeing what's to come. The image of the dead, dead ends in my mind. Policemen swear to God, love sleeping from the guns. I know my friends and I would probably turn and run. If you get out of bed, come find us hanging for the bridge. Bring a stone, all the rage, my little dark age. I read in stereo, the stereo sounds strange. I know that if you hide, it doesn't go away. If you get out of bed and find me standing all alone, open eye, burn the page, my little dark age.
There is a certain connotation attributed to brutalism. The style is often described as Soviet, monolithic, and depressing. This is a misattribution. The modern concept of brutalism is completely different from the historical one. The architectural movement, known as brutalism, started in France and Britain to make use of modern materials like reinforced concrete, readily fabricated steel beams, and tempered glass. The brutalism in Britain and France resembled massive fortresses covered in walkways, balconies, and rooftop plazas, an exploration of intuitive floor plans, novel geometry, and the blatant destruction of natural landscape. These massive megastructures existed with a separation from the rest of the world. In short, they were compressed suburbs. However, the brutalism that was found within the Soviet Union was different. Sure, they made use of the same materials, and there was a hint of influence, but compared to the clear influences behind Stalinism, this brutalism could be considered a Soviet invention. The Soviet style of brutalism focused on creating micro-districts, where nearly everything a person would need was in walking distance of their residence. The key distinction here is that the style of brutalism permeated the city. Brutalism no longer existed as a separation from a city. It existed as an entire ideology of urban design. The Soviet cities of this era were filled with courtyards that made the height of surrounding structures awesome, and the compactness of these structures made most amenities reachable via foot. It was, for lack of a better say, an ideal city, one that could rival the West. And it existed this way, not just because of communism, but proof of how well communism functioned. To put it more clearly, the form was excellent, and the ideology guaranteed that. The communism that Stalinism reflected was different from the communism that brutalism reflected. Whereas Stalinism was the establishment of communism, brutalism was the success of communism, or at least it's supposed to be. Brutalist architecture was massive, not just in its size, but in how much of it was constructed and planned. Without the centralized government, such an undertaking would be impossible, as the collaboration required to design a city where workplaces, schools, and grocery stores were just down the street for everyone, and no one was ever too far away from a hospital or government office just doesn't exist. The accepted impossibility of such a city is because of private industry. Sure, a city can plan for there to be stores along a certain street, but they can't guarantee that one of those stores will sell clothing, and one of them will sell food, and so on and so forth. But the Communist Party could. And they did. The simplest truth is that a centralized government, one with complete control over every industry, lends itself very well to creating very nice cities. Cities that could stand up to the West and say, we are better than you, and it is because of communism. Brutalism was the architectural style which attempted to create evidence for the superiority of communism. It acted as a concrete form of ideals, in much the same way that Stalinism did. Except for Stalinism, there was no great city. Stalinism is an area of Soviet architecture that set a perceived precedent for what communist cities looked like: repetitive, cramped, and elitist. However, the style reflected the ideology perfectly in that sense. The communism that existed during the Stalinist style's peak was communism at its most unstable. The style that was created had two goals. The first being to establish a strong and healthy communist spirit within the Soviet Union, and the second, to create housing for the masses. The issue with this was that the goal of creating housing was secondary to the goal of establishing communism, and even went so far as to work against it at times. The issue with giving everyone comfortable housing is that those who are against communism will be treated as equal to those who support communism, and that is the exact opposite of the message that needed to be spread. Additionally, to establish a strong and healthy communism, spending had to be guaranteed to be allocated properly. So costs were cut in making the most comfortable and varied apartments. It was a bit of a give and take situation. The issue, as has always been with communism, is that the benefits of a centralized, authoritative government will always announce themselves at a time when the government that established those benefits no longer matches the perceived archetype of what that government once was. The argument that communism at one point was terrible holds no grounds, as that is not proof of whether communism is good or bad, if one can even limit the answer of such a question to binary. In a similar vein, the same has been done to brutalism and Stalinism, and whether or not these two styles deserve to be adored because of what they represent, because of how they represent the Soviet Union. There is a strong feeling of bitterness to the Union, justifiably so. However, these styles are not inherently bad or evil. They were simply constructed by an imperfect ideology, and as such are remembered as imperfect.